Agatha. You know the drill, right? As always, I'm counting on you. With these words and his usual smile, my boss, Jack, handed me some documents. I quickly skimmed through the documents and replied that I understood. Once Jack left the office and was out of sight, I rested my forehead on my desk and let out a heavy sigh. My name is Agatha. I work in sales at a company that provides custom design and manufacture of specialized equipment used in food factories and automotive industry. My job mainly involved coordinating with the subsidiaries of our company, and I rarely had to go to business meetings with the actual clients. In these coordination, I hardly ever had a major role. My main job was to accompany Jack to various subsidiary factories, discussing budgets and deadlines for the equipment parts we wanted them to make, and then preparing the reports. Jack was a promising elite worker. His performance stood out even among other salespeople, and both his colleagues and seniors were counting on him. Yet, working under such a person, I didn't feel like I'd grown at all as a salesperson. It seemed that people like him were chosen from the start. Feeling bad about myself, I would tap my cheeks lightly and face my computer screen. That became my daily routine. However, there was a small happiness in my life. I found it enjoyable to have dinner with my beloved family. The only things that would give me emotional support were my kind-hearted husband and my young school-age son with lots of energy. Sometimes, I would get home a bit late, but my husband, concerned, would help prepare dinner, and seeing this, my son would also help by bringing plates to the table. Surrounded by my family at the dinner table, listening to my son's stories about elementary school, I would find solace every day. Because of my family, I somehow managed to do my best at the housework and my job. Then one weekend, both my husband and I were able to take a few days off, so we decided to visit my parents' house, which wasn't far from where we lived. When we arrived, my father greeted us with a smile, and I felt a bit relieved. We had lunch delivered and spent time leisurely. My son seemed to enjoy his time with his grandpa, whom he hadn't seen in a while. My father's now become a cheerful person, but he used to be terribly depressed, having lost my mother, his beloved wife, just before his retirement. I have 2 older brothers, and my father worked hard in a factory to support the family of 5. For him, my mother was someone who emotionally supported him while he devoted himself to his job. Even after her passing, my father continued to work until his retirement, as if trying to forget his loss. But after retiring, he seemed like a person who had no soul. Though I was concerned about him, being the closest geographically but busy with work, I couldn't visit him often, and my brothers, living far away with their families, found it difficult to care for him too. Just when we siblings were worried, our father found joy in a volunteer activity he tried one day. He began living life with a smile, and we, considering putting him in an aged care facility, were deeply relieved. I was reminiscing about all that, having a relaxed moment after lunch, when my father suddenly said something unbelievable. "Oh, that's right. From next week, I'll start working at a factory, owned by the company you work for, Agatha." My father, working at a factory owned by my company. The moment I heard those words, I felt my heart began beating fast. Trying not to show my shock, I gently expressed my concern to my father, pointing out that he didn't need to push himself since he wasn't in need of money. However, he was enthusiastic, explaining that he had gained physical strength from his volunteer activities and would be an immediate asset due to his recent work in a factory. I honestly couldn't agree with my father working, but seeing him so lively and cheerful, I couldn't oppose him strongly, and just nodded silently. In response, he reassured me with a smile, saying that he wouldn't get in my way. One day, after returning from our usual rounds at the subsidiary factories with Jack, he handed me the day's documents with his usual smile and asked if I knew what to do. Forcing a smile, I replied in the affirmative, holding the documents in my hand. As I started to work on the documents, typing on my keyboard, I suddenly heard a male voice nearby and quickly hid the documents. Apprehensively looking towards where the voice came from, I saw President Anderson standing there, smiling at the surprised sales department staff. He said he came to talk to the ace of the sales team after hearing good things from other executives. Of course, President Anderson was here to see Jack, praising him in front of everyone for managing to start production with low budgets and earlier deadlines because of his adjustments. As Jack, in response to the President Anderson's question about his techniques, proudly began to talk about the importance of trust in relationships with factories, I felt a tightening pain in my chest. Pressing my chest to ease the pain, I let out a deep breath after Jack and President Anderson walked away. Then, looking at their diminishing figures, I began creating the report as usual. A few days after this incident, Jack, seemingly motivated by the praise and expectations from President Anderson, brought in a new contract. Accordingly, we went to a subsidiary factory responsible for the production of intricate parts. Following a cheerful Jack, I realized something when we arrived at the factory and went pale. That was the factory where my father said he would be working. Realizing this, I broke into a cold sweat, but knew I had to continue my work as usual. As Jack cheerfully called out to the factory manager, George, and handed him the instruction sheet with a smile, I couldn't bear to watch and involuntarily looked away. This was the usual way of Jack, the ace of sales. Each time, he would set challenging budgets and deadlines for the factory, instructing them on the production and assembly of equipment parts. Even if George and his team reluctantly smiled at those tough conditions, Jack would press on with an unwavering smile. Having financial troubles and yet unable to handle even this level of work after we bailed you out? Well, that's fine. You're not the only option we have. A factory that can't even handle its job properly can be cut off anytime, Jack threatened. This was how Jack would intimidate the subsidiary factories that our parent company had financially revived, leading to George and his team always complying without resistance. When George, with a grim face, was about to nod in agreement, an employee suddenly stood up to defend him. Sorry for interrupting, but isn't that a bit unreasonable? Just because it's a subsidiary factory doesn't mean you shouldn't properly discuss budgets and deadlines. The employee confronted Jack, and that employee was my father. I stood there, dumbfounded. Even the usually compliant George seemed moved by my father's words, opposing Jack for the first time, asking for more time to think it over. Jack's usual smile disappeared, replaced by an irritated look. He clicked his tongue and glared at my father. Why is this old man even working in your factory? Butting in unnecessarily. He should just stick to cleaning toilets at train stations. Jack spat out disdainfully, warning George he'd return the next day, and walked off. Startled, I was about to follow Jack when I met my father's gaze. Frightened by his intense look, I quickly chased after Jack without a word. Back at the office, I was left alone to face the computer, burdened with extra work by the grumpy Jack. I tried to focus on my work, but I couldn't stop thinking about my father defending George and his piercing gaze, repeatedly scratching my head in frustration. Taking a deep breath, I pulled a bundle of documents from my desk drawer. As I stared at them, I had mixed feelings, causing my hands to shake. To calm myself down, I took another deep breath and bit my lip as I again stared at the document. For some reason, I tasted the metallic flavor in my mouth, but I began my final task of the day. The next day, I accompanied Jack to the factory again, with the same instruction sheet as we had the day before. George, appearing in a cold sweat when called by Jack, seemed somewhat emboldened by my father's defiance the previous day, making a rare request to discuss things with Jack. Jack, sighing and annoyed by the trouble caused by my father, told George to bring him there. However, George hesitated and said my father hadn't arrived yet, which prompted Jack to smirk unpleasantly. That old man is late today? Or maybe he got scared and ran away? Jack mocked. I clenched my fists in response to his words, but words stuck in my throat. Realizing there was no further resistance, Jack asked George to comply, demanding his signature of approval on the instructions. As I turned away from a completely disheartened George, the factory's entrance door opened, and my father, with a serious expression, walked in. Seeing my father, Jack twisted his face in annoyance, but the next moment, he turned pale when he saw a group of men in black suits walking in behind my father. It was because those in black suits were the executives of our company, and right next to my father was President Anderson, glaring at us with a cold expression. The executives, coming closer, glared at Jack and sighed, remarking on the true nature of the ace. President Anderson, standing beside my father, began to recount the events leading up to this moment, watching Jack, who looked utterly helpless. Apparently, President Anderson had always felt uneasy about Jack's excessively outstanding performance. He had his suspicions, but never caught Jack red-handed. Despite having direct conversations with him and seeing how well Jack obscured his sales tactics, President Anderson, who had been speaking up to that point, turned to my father sitting next to him, smiled, and thanked him for his help. My father also smiled back and said he was glad to hear that. I was astonished to learn about my father's involvement in this whole affair. Then, President Anderson turned to Jack with a smile and slowly began to speak. Well, what about the unfair treatment to George and the tampering with the instructions and reports? Let's go back to the office and discuss this in detail, shall we? President Anderson said. Hearing his words and being glared at by the executives, Jack began to walk away, looking unsteady. I was about to follow him, hanging my head in shame, when suddenly President Anderson called out to me, which made me tremble. He smiled and noted that the documents Jack handed in yesterday were written by me. In disbelief, I whispered, questioning how he knew. The day before, I gathered the instructions and the tampered reports, hoping the discrepancies would be noticed, and left them on sales manager Alex's desk. It seemed Alex noticed them early in the morning and informed President Anderson. Caught off guard that he realized I was the one who placed the documents, I stood there perplexed. Then President Anderson kindly put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You were the only one who could do this, having worked with Jack all this time. It must have been hard being pushed to the limit. I'm truly sorry for not realizing it sooner." Tears started to stream down my face at his words. President Anderson gently patted my back as I cried like a child. Due to this incident, it became clear to everyone that Jack's achievements were not praiseworthy at all. In fact, he had been threatening not only George but others as well. Consequently, Jack was dismissed. I had braced myself for the same fate. Thanks to President Anderson and Alex, saying they wouldn't have known what Jack was doing without my actions, I only faced a few months of salary reduction. After that, I took over some of the projects that Jack had been handling, working independently and negotiating with George. I found a sense of fulfillment in setting fair budgets and deadlines. Gradually, I began to regain confidence in myself. As time passed, my performance at work steadily improved, which further boosted my self-esteem. One day after concluding a meeting and having a casual chat with George at the factory where my father was still working, I was about to leave when something struck me. I remembered how President Anderson and my father called each other by their first names that day. Curious, I asked my father about it during his break. He replied with a sly grin, suggesting we meet at a bar after work. Though puzzled by his smile, I returned to work. That evening, I went to the bar to see my father. There, I found him and President Anderson sitting and waiting for me. I obediently took a seat, but I was so surprised to see President Anderson there that I was at a loss for words. Ignoring my astonishment, my father began to share the story of how he met President Anderson. After my mother's death, my father felt a deep emptiness staying all by himself at home and started frequenting this nearby bar. One day, he overheard a group of men, around his age, discussing old games like marbles and spinning tops. President Anderson, who was one of the men in that group, noticed my father's interest and invited him to join them. This group was involved in a volunteer activity, teaching traditional games to modern children. And they were planning the next activity for the kids. My father, recalling how he had taught my grandson to play yo-yo, shared that story with the group, leading President Anderson to invite him to their next volunteer activity. Trying it out, my father found joy in interacting with the children, which gradually became a new purpose in his life. Moreover, his friendship with President Anderson at the bar added vitality to his life. One day, President Anderson, while drunk, inadvertently mentioned his suspicion about possible fraudulent activities within the company's sales department but expressed frustration over the lack of evidence. Wanting to repay President Anderson for giving him a purpose in life, my father offered to help investigate. Given that he worked at a factory all his life and knew what to do, he ensured that he wouldn't be a burden. Initially, President Anderson declined, not wanting to put a burden on my father, but he eventually agreed, appreciating my father's desire to help. I was stunned to learn about their unique connection. My father then turned to me with a surprised and stern look, having not expected his daughter to be involved in such shady dealings. As I lowered my eyes under my father's gaze, he gave a smile and spoke kindly to me. "I knew you weren't doing this because you wanted to. Your mother hoped that you would be kind to everyone when you were born. As a father, I know there was no way you would treat others poorly. You're just like your mother hoped, a kind person." Hearing my father's words, tears streamed down my face. President Anderson kindly offered me a handkerchief, and with a warm smile, he gently encouraged me to take better care of myself. My father continues to work at our subsidiary factory, finding joy in his work. He is still active in volunteer work. He happily told me he was a yo-yo master and very popular among the children. With that in mind, I can't afford to be outdone. Determined not to be outshone by my father, who's enjoying life so much at his age, I took a deep breath and greeted George, the factory manager, with a smile. "Good morning. Thank you for always being so helpful. May we discuss the next request?" "Come on, you can't be serious." A month after giving birth, I returned home from my parents' house in Boston. My husband, John, saw me as soon as he got home from work, dropped his briefcase at the sight of me, and blurted out those words. "Your body shape has changed a lot." "What?" "My name is Emily, and I'm 31 years old. I'm a housewife who just gave birth last month." Returning home excited for the new life ahead with our family of 3, I was greeted by John's blatantly insensitive remarks. I was at a loss for words, wondering why he would say such things, as I thought he would have been so keen to see our newborn baby for the first time. John and I met at work and tied the knot. After graduating from high school, I worked in the accounting department of a company in downtown New York, where John was my boss. We settled in a home close to our workplace. Due to my family's home being far away, I went back there shortly before my due date. And a month after giving birth to our daughter, Michelle, I returned home. John couldn't find the time to visit me and our baby in Boston due to his busy work schedule, so this was his first time meeting her. And yet, seriously? I just got back from a long trip and this is what I get? At first, I thought he was joking, so I responded lightly. But it turned out that John was serious. "Come on, you've gained what, 20 pounds? "Well, yes, but it's normal to gain 20 pounds during pregnancy, which I read in a pregnancy book," I retorted. "You need to build strength for childbirth, prepare your body for breastfeeding, and have energy for the sleepless nights. It's perfectly normal." No. Yours is extreme." Instead of the warm welcome I had imagined on the flight back home, John left me with those harsh words, not even sparing a glance at our baby, before retreating to our bedroom in disappointment. "What?" I was stunned by his tone and attitude, and I accidentally dropped the diaper I was holding in my hand. I figured his mood would improve after a good night's sleep, so Michelle and I slept in a second bedroom that night. But John's behavior that evening was just the beginning. From the next day onwards, he started mocking my weight relentlessly. Seeing me eat sweet potatoes, which I learned in a childbirth and parenting class at the hospital were good for lactation. He would make cruel jokes. "A potato eating a potato? That's cannibalism, it's disgusting to see a fat person eat, and pigs eat grains, right? I heard potatoes may soon be reclassified as a grain. Oink, oink." Moreover, he began to make insensitive comments about our intimate life, saying things like, "We were abstaining during pregnancy. I thought we could get back to it once you came home, but this is just impossible. It would just feel like a chore to me. And I wouldn't even get paid for it. That would be equivalent of doing unpaid overtime." As expected of someone with the accounting background, he started to talk about our intimate life as if it were business, saying, "For any business, time is money. And we'll have to stop wasting time on low-value activities. In our case, that would be our intimate life, since you no longer look like a woman. According to our new household management policy." Every time he opened his mouth, it was to insult me. He no longer said anything nice about me. Naturally, he didn't lift a finger to help with household chores or childcare. But I had Michelle to look after. I tried to ignore John's remarks, thinking of them as no more annoying than a barky dog in the house. But then, something happened that pushed me to my limit. It occurred one night when John came home drunk from the end-of-year party. Sitting in the living room, he slumped over the table, only lifting his face to look at me. I was sitting next to him, breastfeeding. With a burp and the smell of alcohol, John started to mumble something absurd. "Babies aren't as cute as people say. They're bald, their skin is red and blotchy, and they only babble out gibberish sounds." "What?" "It's cute. That's just something people say, right? Because I'm honest and look at things realistically, just as I do in business." "What?" And when I see you breastfeeding that not so cute baby, it makes me think. You became fat to give birth to something that's not even cute. And now your breasts are sagging from nursing. That's just terrible. What? Looking at those sagging breasts, your upper and lower abdomen. You look like a pill bug. A pill bug. Yes, you've started to look like a pill bug to me. Seriously, I can't deal with that. If we were to do it, it would be like a wrestling match between different species. With those words, he suddenly grabbed my hand, dragged me and the baby to the rear of our house. Hey, what are you doing? I protested, but before I could resist further, he pushed us into the back room, shut the door, and left me with the words, "Just stay in your nest, pill bug." Then, I heard the sound of him opening the bathroom door, singing Roly Poly song. Unforgivable. He not only called me names but also said our baby wasn't cute. Being drunk wouldn't be a valid excuse for making such disrespectful remarks. Filled with a sense of righteous anger, I still nursed and slept with my baby in that dark room. The next morning, when I opened the door, my anger reached its peak. It wasn't just the sight of his clothes left all over the floor on the way to the bathroom or the used cups left out that infuriated me. It was when I saw the cardboard sign taped to the door of the room where I had been locked up and made to sleep. It read "A pill bug's room." Though it looked like it was written while intoxicated, it was unmistakably John's handwriting. I would never forgive him. Then I decided to change my situation. The first step was self-reform. I placed the pill bug's room sign on the door of my new bedroom. It was there for me to see whenever I felt disheartened. And on the wall, I hung a Beyoncé poster. I'd always admired her, and her style and positive energy were just the motivation I needed to aspire to be like her. Thus began my long-term weight loss project in the so-called pill bug's room. There were plenty I could do at home. I started walking on tiptoes. Whenever I felt like sitting down, I would sit on an invisible chair. I would do squats while doing laundry or brushing my teeth. And do crunches after breastfeeding. The postpartum body is more prone to losing weight because the fat is softer, the midwife said, and she was right. The weight started to drop quickly. As the baby got a bit older, she would giggle every time my face came close during abdominal exercises with her on my belly. And she enjoyed it like a seesaw when I placed her on my thighs during leg lifts. I continued to work out and maintain a healthy diet while taking care of my child. Soon enough, I regained my pre-pregnancy body shape. Since I was sweating a lot from the workouts, I kept wearing my post-pregnancy tracksuits, simply replacing the elastic in the waistband. There was no need to dress up in front of John, who called me a pill bug, and of course, I went makeup-free every day. Naturally, John, who had been calling me "Hey, pill bug," failed to notice my transformation since I'd been wearing the same clothes. After all, he hardly ever looked at me. The second phase was improving the situation. If you wanted to improve your own situation, you would have to create a gap between you and your rivals. So I planned to make John fat. Since there were no eateries around where he worked, I would make him lunch daily. Instead of packing balanced lunch, I began packing French fries, burger, burritos, and such. In the evenings, I kept serving John, who would come home around 9 p.m., pizza and fried chicken, saying, "These are your favorites, right?" Of course, I made sure to have my meal with my child by 6 p.m. I was always mindful to make my diet consist of 70% vegetables and 30% protein. Eating in a balanced way, rotating through each type of food, proved to be effective. I switched from white to brown bread, making egg lettuce tomato sandwiches, which was a lot healthier than having white bread with peanut butter. Hunger pangs would go away if I just ignored them for 10 minutes. Whenever I couldn't bear the hunger, I would just look at myself in the mirror and then at the Beyoncé poster, and turn that hunger into motivation, helping me maintain my diet. Of course, I knew I couldn't keep this up without some form of accountability, so I started doing Twitter, which is now called X. All I did was take a photo of my belly every night before taking a shower. I posted those photos daily on Emily at Home Workout, along with the exercises I completed. 4 years passed. My daughter started kindergarten. By then, our daughter had grown and started talking a lot, perhaps becoming cuter in John's eyes, and he began to show her affection. But after all he had put me through, and the things he said to me when our daughter was born, it was too late for me to forgive him. Not to mention, the nickname pill bug had stuck, fueling my determination even further. Once my daughter started kindergarten, I took the opportunity to work part-time at a local fitness club during the hours she was in kindergarten. I was just working at reception and doing cleaning. But being around customers who were highly conscious about fitness and beauty helped my own sense of beauty develop even further. And everyone said, "Emily, you look so beautiful, and you have a great figure too." I was convinced that I definitely fell into the beautiful category. Now, the time was right. I was determined to confront John with everything he said to me for the past 4 years. On Tuesday, at 1 p.m., at the cafe run by John's parents in Coney Island. John's parents owned a cafe that served desserts near a famous landmark, a popular tourist spot. Featured in guidebooks, the cafe was bustling. As John's parents had been asking me to bring their granddaughter whenever we had time, I decided to visit their cafe. Tuesday afternoons were relatively quiet, so John's parents left the part-time staff to handle the customers while we had a little time together in the garden at the back. John said he would come to meet us in the afternoon as he had to go to the office in the morning and do the month-end close. After sending John off to work, I carefully applied my base makeup and straightened my hair with the hair iron. Though I usually kept my hair in a bun in front of John, letting it down and ironing it revealed glossy waves. I drew on eyebrows, which I had barely any when I was barefaced, and instead of wearing the tracksuits, I put on a light pink summer dress. Size 4. I wouldn't let John call me a pill bug again. I deliberately arrived 10 minutes late. John had already texted me saying he was at the cafe. "You're late." What, does a pill bug move that slow? I received another message from him just before I entered the cafe. Snap. I did something on my phone to make it sound like that before I put it away in my handbag. I couldn't wait to see what was going to happen. I took a deep breath, puffed out my chest. As I opened the door, it made a tinkling sound. John's mother, hearing the door open, exclaimed in surprise, "Welcome." Oh. Oh my. Emily. I've missed you, and Michelle too. Hi, Jane. I walked up to my mother-in-law and gave her a hug. Come this way. Let's talk in the garden, John's already here. And Michelle, you're just adorable. My mother-in-law, more excited to see her granddaughter than to attend to customers, handed off her tray to a part-timer. As I walked into the garden at the back, I caught sight of John's back. He seemed to notice the sound of my footsteps. Turning around, he said, "You're so late, how long did you expect me to wait, pill?" Until that moment, I never really knew how wide human eyes could open in surprise, how nostrils flared, and how mouths dropped. It was as if every possible facial orifice was wide open in shock. Of course, he was silent after that. "Hello, John," I said, deliberately aloof. "Oh my, Michelle is a very good-looking girl. And she looks just like you, Emily," my mother-in-law said, as she brought 5 servings of their popular dessert to our table and joined us. "You seem at a loss for words, John?" I broke the silence. "Well..." John stumbled over his words, and then his father arrived. "I'm so glad that you're here. I wanted to see Michelle." Surrounding Michelle, the in-laws had crinkled smiles on their faces, cooing over her and saying how adorable she was. In stark contrast, John, with a strained expression on his face, began to say, "Well, of course, she's adorable. We're her biological parents." So? The conversation began. Without missing a beat, I retorted, "Yes, you and a pill bug are her parents if that's what you meant to say." John froze, and his parents stopped engaging with Michelle. "What did you say?" My mother-in-law asked for clarification. "I said a pill bug. John has been calling me that since I gave birth, saying I don't look like a woman anymore. Or worse, I just look like a pill bug. Wait, just wait. If you had lost weight quick enough. You didn't even notice I was losing weight. You said you couldn't see me as a woman anymore and shoved me into that back room, didn't you? And you didn't notice my transformation at all. For the past 4 years, you haven't even looked at me, but just kept calling me a pill bug." I pulled out the cardboard sign labeled "Pill Bug's Room" from my handbag and placed it on the table. My in-laws were stunned. "Look," I continued. "I hope this sign alone shows you the kind of treatment I've been enduring, but this isn't the only proof that I have." I took out my phone. Screenshots of John calling me a pill bug on text messages, including the one sent just before my arrival at the cafe. The sheer volume of evidence left my in-laws speechless. "John, what have you done?" his father said in a strained voice as John shouted angrily, "This is ridiculous, gathering evidence like that." Then, laughter came from behind. "Wow, is that for real?" Two high school girls at a nearby table were giggling and looking our way. Guys like him always yell at beautiful women. That's just hilarious. He should look at himself in the mirror, a creepy, fat man yelling at others. Their laughter and comments were clearly audible at our table. Speaking of pill bugs, what about you now? You've gained weight and become less presentable. I paused for a moment before retorting sharply. You look more like a stink bug. After saying that, I turned to John's parents and showed them a photo taken right after giving birth at the hospital. Please have a look at it. This is Michelle right after she was born, and me. John's mother, looking at the photo and having tears in her eyes. I remember seeing this photo. Michelle looked so small, so adorable. I was so glad she was born into our family. But after giving birth and coming home, John told me that wasn't right, that he couldn't see me as a woman anymore. And even said that because my body changed from nursing, I looked like a pill bug. The last straw was when he said our newborn Michelle wasn't cute because she was red and blotchy. John's parents were at a loss for words. I've had enough. I pulled out a business card from my handbag. I've just shown you the evidence of the treatment I've been receiving from you, John. I think it's time to end our relationship. Here's my lawyer's business card. You'll hear from him very soon. So be prepared. Wait a minute. You're just a pill bug leeching off me. How do you plan to feed Michelle and yourself? John's predictable retort was something I was already prepared for. I quickly grabbed my phone off the table and switched the display. My ex account. Emily at home workout. My followers had already exceeded 10,000. Michael, the manager at the fitness club, said, after seeing this, he'd hire me as a full-time employee. The screen was filled with comments like, "Amazing how you lost weight at home. You're an inspiration. Emily, you're so beautiful. I admire you. Enough." Suddenly, my mother-in-law raised her voice. "John, you have no idea how hard it is to become a mother. Childbirth is incredibly painful. Gaining weight is about maintaining the strength to endure the labor pain. Mothers can hardly sleep to look after their baby. And you didn't know any of this. Continuously calling your wife a pill bug, how can you even apologize to Emily? Shame on you." Then, she turned to me, "Emily, I apologize on behalf of my foolish son. Please, let us know if there's anything we can do to help you. And I hope you could still let us see adorable Michelle from time to time? Right. Since we run a busy cafe, we should be able to support you financially. We'd be grateful if you could let us celebrate Michelle's birthdays without our foolish son," my father-in-law added. And soon after that, I started working as a single mother at the fitness club. "Mommy, my friends say you're beautiful. Michelle always tells me." To which I always respond, "To be beautiful, you have to work hard. It's important to believe in yourself and strive. I hope you grow up to be someone who could show care and put in a big effort." As for the stink bug. I mean John, I heard from his mother that he tried to lose weight in hopes of getting back with me. But apparently, he couldn't even stick to a diet and remains a stink bug to this day. I have started working in earnest at the fitness club, and at the same time, my ex-followers have now surpassed 20,000. Actually, I've even been approached by a publishing company. I'm now writing a book titled I Can Do It Too, A Homemaker's Guide to Grabbing Happiness, aiming to empower homemakers around the world to strive for their happiness. I intend to continue my endeavors to support and inspire others. Maria, upon entering our home, immediately claimed the guest room as her own space. Because it's closest to both the bathroom and the bath, and I don't have to go through the living room, so I don't have to see anyone's face. Although I thought she was referring to me when she said, "I don't have to see anyone's face," I refrained from harsh words because she is pregnant and just swallowed my feelings. Then, my husband said, "Look, I want you to leave this house. You bully our son's wife, don't work, and just leech off our home, you're the worst." I don't remember bullying Maria or leeching without working. Enough is enough, I've lost all patience. This house is in my name and it's my house. My eldest son and his wife will live with us. So you can leave. We'll pay the $700 mortgage. Sure, I replied. Although the mortgage is actually $2,700. So, I obediently agreed to leave the house. Take the dog with you. Of course. I couldn't possibly leave Buddy in such a precarious home. I feel bad for David, but I thought it was like the devil himself had arrived when Maria came into our home. Cursing and arriving at our home, I've been observing her, wondering what her purpose was. Just as I suspected, Maria turned out to be a terrible person. John was naive enough to be completely taken in by Maria, which surprised me. I understand, I'm not young anymore, and I must have changed. Yet, I had hoped that's how we would age together. Just like that house. Being fickle is a disadvantage. You can't finish anything and are irresponsible, perhaps eternal damnation suits you. Especially since your beloved young demon is with you. Both of you should just fall into damnation. My name is Dorothy, a 58-year-old working housewife. I met John, my husband who is 6 years my junior, about 30 years ago through a mutual acquaintance. At that time, I was 28, and John was 22. John, in his first year as a working adult after graduating from college, was an utterly dazzling presence for me. John, who liked older women, was not only good at being spoiled but also surprisingly gentlemanly and mature in his behavior. And I began to have feelings for him. John felt the same, and after 6 months of dating, we got married. Then, thinking about our future family and retirement, we decided to build a house. John had always said since the beginning of our marriage, it's better to build a house while we're young. Indeed, considering the mortgage, it's better when you're younger. But it was difficult to get a housing loan under John's name as a first-year employee. I could have built it under my name, but John's pride as a man insisted it be in his name. Eventually, we decided to build the house after John had worked steadily for a year and had a track record to get a loan. I was working too, so I diligently saved for our house. It wasn't hard work for me, because it was for our own house. Also, at John's strong request, we managed our finances separately after marriage. We created a joint account in John's name for living expenses, where we both deposited a fixed amount. It was truly shared property of the married couple. From there, we would cover food expenses and utility bills. Even after building the house, we agreed to split the monthly mortgage repayment. Even deciding on such rules as a couple felt fun as newlyweds. And a year after our marriage, we finally got our long-awaited dream home. The brand new house, with its carefully planned layout, fulfilled our hearts. A year after building the house, we were blessed with our eldest son David, and 3 years later, our second son James. And I felt the utmost happiness. Now, 30 years after our marriage, David has married and left home. With James also starting to live alone, only the two of us were left in the spacious house. Still, I intended to enjoy our slow time together in this house. After the kids left home, John started talking about getting a dog. Probably to distract from loneliness, but I guess there were other reasons too. Since we started living just the two of us, John became increasingly harsh towards me. I'm sick of waking up to your face every morning. He could say such things without batting an eye. Even when I mentioned that aging is a part of life for both of us, he wouldn't accept it, saying, I used to think older ladies looked pretty. But I guess it's annoying that you're aging faster than me. Saying so, he would quickly retreat to his room. In other words, he didn't want to face me, which led him to suggest getting a dog. I love animals, so I wasn't opposed to getting a pet. While John goes to work at the office, I've always worked from home, so I can take care of the dog during the day. My concern is whether John can truly take responsibility for its care until the end. When we built this house, John said, we'll keep it as shiny as new forever, and at first, he did put effort into daily cleaning and maintenance. But within a month, he grew tired of it and said, houses naturally deteriorate over time. It's best to accept them as they are. The expensive pressure washer and various other tools bought for house maintenance were soon left unused. Similarly, when our first son, David, was born, John was enthusiastic about child rearing, claiming, I'll be in charge of bathing him. Don't bathe him until I get home. But this lasted only for the first week. Despite waiting for John to bathe David, as he claimed it was his responsibility, he would just say, "I'm tired today," and go to sleep. From then on, John never bathed David again. With our second son, James, I took care of everything from the start. John, who did nothing himself, would still criticize, saying things like, "Aren't you wiping him properly? Doesn't he need more moisturizer?" And when I'd ask him to watch the kids on weekends, he'd say, the kids would rather be taken care of by their mother, and take a nap. So far, I've been handling house cleaning and child rearing alone, as if they were solely a woman's job. However, John stopped contributing to our joint account over a decade ago. He didn't contribute to the monthly living expenses or the house mortgage. The first time he didn't make a deposit, he said, "I'm broke because of consecutive weddings this month. Just for this month, please." I let it slide, thinking it was just for 1 month. But there were no deposits the following month, and the month after that. Unable to delay the mortgage payments, I continued to pay them with my money. John couldn't sustain cleaning, childcare, or even financial responsibilities. That's why I was worried about him being able to properly care for a dog. I could only envision a future where I ended up taking care of everything. Still, if getting a dog could keep our marriage harmonious, I agreed to welcome one. We got a 6-month-old female Shih Tzu. John had fallen in love with her at first sight at the pet store. I was hesitant about adopting a puppy, considering our ages and the dog's lifespan. There's a chance that we might pass away before the dog does. If that happens, she would be left all alone. However, my worries were alleviated knowing that if anything happened to us, our sons would take care of her, allowing me to welcome her with peace of mind. The puppy, round and playful, was named Coco. Initially, there were smiles in our 2-person household with Coco. Watching her play tirelessly, so small and adorable, was endlessly charming. John seemed happy feeding her and brushing her. I thought maybe this time, he could take care of her properly. One day, while working in my room, I heard Coco crying from behind the door. It was 7 p.m., but John, who usually would be home by then, hadn't returned. So, I fed Coco in his place. But from that day onwards, such incidents became more frequent. I casually mentioned to John, "You've been coming home late recently." Coco seemed lonely. He replied, "I've been training a new employee at work. So, for a while, can you take care of Coco?" I expected this, but it happened sooner than I thought. I believed he would at least care for her for a year, maybe until she grew into an adult. But I doubted whether a senior employee like John would directly train newcomers. This suspicion was confirmed when I saw a message on his phone saying, "Thanks for the meal the other day. Please invite me to dinner again," accompanied by cute emojis while he was in the bathroom. His training was something outside of work. Judging from this text, she must be a very young woman. I sighed and hugged my pet, Coco, tightly. Ever since John stopped caring for Coco, the pet has become completely attached to me. John doesn't seem to find this amusing. On holidays, when he occasionally tries to play ball with Coco, she doesn't respond to his invitations. Instead, Coco climbs onto my lap, which makes John angrily declare, "Who do you think raised you? For the past few months, I've been the one taking care of him." So, it makes sense that he's attached to me, but I don't say this to John. It's the same with the kids. If anything, they seem to favor me over John. Especially David, who's a mama's boy. As a child, he always followed me around. Whenever I was out of sight, he would cry out loudly, calling for me, possibly out of anxiety. Though his gentle and overly kind nature made me worry about his future, David has grown up and even gotten married. While pondering these things, my phone rang. It was a call from Maria, David's wife. "Hello, Dorothy? Actually, I'm pregnant. Could I possibly stay with you for a while?" I was surprised by the sudden news, but the thought of having a grandchild was delightful. Moreover, David often isn't home due to his long-haul truck driving job. I suggested that we should talk it over when David returned home. Then, I thought I heard a faint tongue-clicking sound, but Maria cheerfully agreed, saying, "Okay, I'll visit soon." So I brushed it off as a misunderstanding. On the weekend, David and Maria visited our house together. I was surprised to see that Maria, despite being pregnant, was still slim and slender. It's still early in the pregnancy, so my belly is small. "Don't stare, it's creepy," she said. David admonished her, saying, "That's not a nice way to talk," but Maria remained aloof. I had met Maria when she and David were getting married, but she didn't seem like this back then. I assumed her moodiness was due to the pregnancy and tried not to say anything that would upset her. Eventually, John joined us in the living room. His mood visibly lifted upon seeing the young and stylish Maria, saying unnecessary things like, "Maria is always cute and stylish, a real gem compared to my old-fashioned wife." In response, Maria, while laughing, said, "Oh, stop it, John. I bet Dorothy was better looking when she was young, right?" David looked anxious and sweaty sitting next to Maria. All I could do was sigh. David, being away from home, probably felt he couldn't be firm with Maria. Moreover, his current job was obtained through one of Maria's contacts. She had wished for a well-paying job, prompting David to switch careers upon their marriage. "Sorry, Mom. Since I can't be at home much, could you look after Maria for a while?" Honestly, I didn't have a good impression of Maria, but I couldn't refuse my beloved son's request. As for John, he seemed eager for Maria to stay, saying, "You can start staying over tonight." In the end, we decided to welcome Maria into our home starting the following week. David left for his long-distance job with a look of regret, boarding his truck. Upon entering our house, Maria promptly occupied the guest room, deciding it was her space. I chose this because it's close to the bathroom and bath, and I don't have to see anyone if I go through the living room. I swallowed my words, understanding her comment about not having to see anyone was directed at me, and considering she was pregnant. I refrained from harsh words. However, despite being pregnant, Maria often went out late at night. She would return home around the last train. Despite David entrusting me with her care, whenever I expressed my concern to Maria, she would snap, "Would you mind? Pregnant women get stressed out, you know, and dismiss me." However, even though she stays home all day, she doesn't lift a finger to do any household chores. She expects me to do everything, from laundry to meal preparation, and even to clean the guest room she's taken over. John keeps pampering her, saying she's pregnant, so she needs to rest. One day, Maria said, "I'm going to the hospital. I'll be admitted for about 2 weeks, so I need a substantial amount of money." "Oh. And don't visit me at all. The nurses will take care of everything." So, I handed her tens of thousands of dollars. The need for hospitalization made me worry if there were complications with the baby. And naturally, this made me concerned for Maria's health as well. I debated contacting David, but Maria had strictly forbidden it, so I refrained. After a worrisome 2 weeks, Maria returned from the hospital. When she came home, her skin was noticeably darker than before she was hospitalized. "Did you get a tan, Maria?" I asked casually. She became upset and exclaimed, "That's terrible. You know, during pregnancy, skin can darken and other minor issues can occur. Don't you know that? It's something I'm self-conscious about. Are you trying to be cruel by mentioning it?" So, I decided not to say anything further. To top it off, she claimed, "I hate dogs," and kicked Coco, leading me and Coco to decide to stay as far away from Maria as possible. 3 months have passed since Maria came to our house. I prefer not to see her face, so I spend most of my time working in my room. I've moved Coco's toilet and food into my room, and we live our lives avoiding any contact with Maria. In the morning, before John and Maria wake up, I prepare meals. In the evening, when Maria goes out, I use the opportunity to clean the house and do the laundry. If she needs anything, she calls me, otherwise, I avoid meeting her. One day, I happened to go to the living room during the day and saw Maria happily doing her nails. Remembering how I couldn't stand the smell of nail polish when I was pregnant with David, I asked her a simple question. "Are you okay with morning sickness, Maria?" Again, my words seemed to offend her. She glared at me and yelled towards John in the bathroom. "Hey, John. Dorothy is forcing me to work because I don't have morning sickness." Hearing Maria's voice, John rushed out of the bathroom and scolded me, "What are you saying? You're terrible. How can a woman like you not understand the hardships of a pregnant woman?" Another time, I saw Maria smoking under the kitchen vent. I reflexively snatched the cigarette away. Maria looked at me, clicked her tongue, and dramatically fell to the ground. Ouch. "Stop it, Dorothy. Forgive me, please." Because the living room window was open, neighbors gathered, hearing Maria's voice, wondering what was happening. I apologized to them, saying, "It's nothing," and they left. Maria was smirking at me. David comes home every 2 weeks, and Maria's attitude changes unbelievably during his visits. She hides her devilish side and becomes docile only during the days David is home. As soon as he leaves for work again, she reverts to her true self. Seeing Maria's behavior makes me wonder what David saw in her that made him want to marry her. Similarly, I find myself questioning what I saw in John, who has now become a puppet to his daughter-in-law. Back then, he was intensely focused on his work, with the goal of building a house in his own name. Back then, John was earnest and shining. It's been 30 years since that dream was realized, and we had children. Now, I'm the one repaying the mortgage of this house. Moreover, John has stopped contributing to our joint account, so I cover all living expenses with my money. Does John even realize this? Or does he know and still has the audacity to act high and mighty? While petting Coco on my bed, I was pondering these thoughts when a message arrived on my phone. It was from John. "Come to the living room immediately," it said. I placed Coco in the cage in the corner of the room and reluctantly headed to the living room. I idly wondered if he might finally confront me with a divorce. Lost in thought, I headed to the living room. There, John and Maria were sitting on the sofa, drinking tea using my favorite cup and saucer. They had used the teapot, but incorrectly. Without a tea strainer, the pot was full of tea leaves. Their cups were also filled with leaves, ruining the elegance of the cups and saucers. Yet, they seemed to be enjoying the atmosphere, so I remained silent. Let me be frank. I wondered to myself if John truly understood what it meant to be direct. Perhaps because of my unfocused expression, John glared at me sharply. "You know, I want you to leave this house. You're always picking on your daughter-in-law, not doing any work and just leeching off us. You're the worst. Did you know? Maria is a model. She plans to continue working even after giving birth. How admirable is that? It's a stark contrast to you, who isn't independent at all. Enough is enough, I'm fed up. This house is in my name, it's my house. The eldest son and his wife will live here, so get out. We'll pay the $700 mortgage. I have no recollection of bullying my daughter-in-law or not working and leeching off them. Frankly, I couldn't care less about Maria being a model. If he seriously thinks I'm not independent, he's greatly mistaken. There were many questionable points in John's speech, but what puzzled me most was the mention of $700 for the mortgage. It seems John thinks the house mortgage is only $700. He must be mistaken since he hasn't been paying it for a while. But since he's telling me to leave, it doesn't really matter at this point. Although the mortgage is actually $2,700, I responded, "Okay," and decided to leave the house. "Take the dog with you." Of course. I couldn't possibly leave Coco in such a dangerous house. John and Maria didn't seem interested in me anymore and were engrossed in their own conversation. Right, if John is going to take over the mortgage payments, I need to give him the passbook for our joint account. I went back to my room, grabbed the passbook, and handed it to John. This account is where the mortgage payments are withdrawn from. Good luck with that. John forcefully snatched the passbook I handed to him and started checking it. He and Maria were smirking together. They were probably just looking at the balance. Indeed, the account had a considerable amount saved up, diligently accumulated by me as family savings. Yet, the important part, the details, seemed to be completely overlooked by them. Well, it's fine. They can deal with what comes next. I went back to my room and packed my belongings. Gathering Coco's things too, I ended up with more luggage than expected, but that was not a problem. I had no intention of leaving anything important in this house. Before leaving, I made a phone call. It was to my younger son, James. I briefly explained the situation and decided to go to James's place. Then, I left the house I had lived in for 30 years. It was honestly sad and frustrating to leave the house this way. But at that moment, I didn't want to spend another second in that space. When I reached James's apartment, he came down to the entrance to meet me. Seeing him casually help with the luggage made me realize how much my son had grown. "Mom, you've had a tough time. Take it easy today." His kind words almost brought me to tears. I gratefully accepted James's hospitality and rested for the day. The next evening, I received a call from David. He had probably just finished work and returned home. Mom? Are you at James's place? I heard from him. I'm sorry, it's because I brought Maria home, isn't it? I'm really sorry. I could tell from his voice over the phone that David was deeply apologizing. Given his kind nature, he probably couldn't stand up to Maria. I had guessed that Maria behaved well when David was home every 2 weeks, probably to ensure she got her allowance properly. I'm fine. But have you seen Maria? How was she? David seemed hesitant to speak. Then he said, Mom, there's something I want to talk about. Can I come over now? As if he had made up his mind. That night, David, James, and I had a long talk. A lot of things became clear. I have no doubts anymore, it's time to divorce John. I feel bad for David, but I can't stay married to a man who brought home a devil-like daughter-in-law. I had been observing Maria's behavior and intentions since she arrived at our home. As I suspected, Maria turned out to be incredibly spiteful. Months passed, yet her belly never grew larger. From the day she returned from the hospital, her skin was notably tanned. She seemed inseparable from alcohol and cigarettes, like they were her best friends. Using her youth and beauty, she easily charmed and manipulated John. John, for his part, was astonishingly simple-minded in how easily he was swayed by Maria. He had developed a fondness for younger women. I understand that I'm no longer young and have changed since those days. Wrinkles have increased, and my body has started to ache. Still, I believed that aging together, just the two of us, was part of life's journey. Much like the way our house has aged over the years. Having a fickle nature is a disadvantage, after all. You can never see things through to the end, John, and for someone as irresponsible as you, a never-ending hell seems fitting. Especially with your beloved young devil by your side. Both of you might as well descend to hell together. 2 months have passed since I left the house. Lately, I've been doing well at work. This month looks promising too. As I paused for a break, my phone rang. It was John's name on the screen. I was expecting a call around this time, but I wish it wasn't on such a pleasant day. Still, I had to answer because it was important. Yes, what's hap? Before I could finish asking, I was met with a shout from the other end. Hey. For some reason, we're being pressed for the house's mortgage payment. It's strange because we're supposed to be paying it every month. Did you do something? Just as I thought, it was about the mortgage payments. John, thinking the mortgage was only $700, couldn't possibly pay the actual amount of $2,700. He must have already used up all the savings I left. I haven't done anything. More importantly, have you been properly depositing your salary for living expenses and mortgage payments? If you had, there would be no reason for you to be pressed for payments. What I said was entirely reasonable. John, taken aback, didn't retort immediately. But after some thought, he lashed out again. I calculated and left enough money. I made sure to leave $2,100 for 3 months, so there's no way the payment should be delayed. He still hadn't realized it. I thought he would at least glance through the account statement. I sighed deeply, countless times. Continuing this conversation over the phone was pointless. All right. I'll come over tonight. David and James will join me. Have Maria wait there too. When I said that, John reluctantly agreed. Before I knew it, David and James were near me. They seemed to have a rough idea of what was going on. Both of them nodded towards me. I nodded back emphatically and headed towards the house where John and Maria were. Upon arrival, Maria was the first to burst out. David. Where have you been? And what's this about quitting your job? I got you that job through my contacts. Don't joke around. As soon as she opened the door, she started yelling furiously, causing not only David but also me and James to recoil. David calmed her down, and we all entered the house. I was shocked upon reaching the living room. It was dirtier than I could ever imagine, completely different from when I lived there. Clothes were strewn about, and leftovers were left untouched. Dust had accumulated on the shelves, and tiny fruit flies were buzzing around. When David seated Maria on the sofa, his usually timid demeanor was replaced by a firm, husbandly presence. Maria, about what we discussed earlier. You said you got me the job through your acquaintance, but I never asked for that, right? I wanted to keep working at my previous company. But somehow, I was resigned without my knowledge and employed there without consent. I've been trying hard, thinking it was your wish, but I always had a feeling of suspicion. David explained that he had reluctantly agreed to change jobs because Maria wanted a better salary after their marriage. However, he had noticed that the salary was not as good as expected for the hard work involved. To his surprise, his salary was even reduced after working there for a while. When he inquired with the company, he received an unsatisfactory explanation about rising fuel costs, which only increased his suspicions. I had James investigate, and it turns out the deducted amount was going to you, Maria. Since it's a company of an acquaintance. Such things are possible, right? If that's the case, just tell me. I would welcome it if it's for our living expenses. But you were also asking me for living expenses, medical bills, and more. Where did that money go? I'm starting to lose trust in you. David expressed his quiet anger with a somewhat sad look on his face. I felt an urge to hug David right away. What's the big deal about money? You're such a boring and dull man, and you got to marry me. You should be contributing money. Yes. I had you transfer to that company so you wouldn't be at home with your dreary face. I thought I married a man who would do anything I say. But you're the worst. Maria retorted arrogantly, not showing any remorse for hurting David. James and I couldn't help but lean forward at her attitude, showing no signs of concern for John. I wanted to slap her hard on behalf of David. My fists were trembling slightly. Enough with the marital spat, settle that later. My issue is more important. Listen, Dorothy, as I said earlier. I had enough money for 3 months of repayment. John, who had been silent until now, began to speak. It seems to be a continuation of the earlier phone conversation. 3 months, huh? That means you should have left at least $8,100. My remark made John's eyes widen. What? The loan repayment is $700 a month, isn't it? Maria said so, right? About $700 a month for a mortgage. It turned out that information came from Maria. Maria, standing next to John, nodded vigorously in agreement. That's right. My friend bought a condo with monthly payments of $700 to $800. She said it's like paying rent. Unfortunately for Maria, this was a single-family home, and John had been quite particular about the interior and layout. Moreover, the location was near a station, making it a prime piece of real estate. John had taken out the maximum possible loan to build this house on a 35-year mortgage. Did you actually look at the bank statements? There's no way this house costs only $700 a month. At my words, John hastily pulled out his bank book. Maria peered over. What? The repayment is $2,700 a month. John turned pale, dropping the bank book in shock. He should have confirmed this multiple times when buying the house. Do people forget such things after 30 years? That's right. So $2,100 isn't even enough for 1 month. I couldn't help but smile. He had only left $2,100, but I would ask about the whereabouts of the other savings I had later. Wait a minute. I didn't hear anything about that. You were the one who said I could have this house for $700 a month, Johnny. So, Maria refers to John as Johnny. Is that the kind of relationship they have? A chill ran down my spine, and I wasn't the only one. John was looking at the two with a cold expression. What are you going to do? Can you pay? If you want to keep living in this house, you have to. And by the way, we have no intention of paying for a house we're not living in, so don't expect anything from us. David and James nodded in agreement with my words. Then John questioned me. Wait, then how have you been paying the $2,700 monthly loan? A housewife like you lounging at home couldn't possibly pay that. After 30 years together, John still didn't understand me. It was a profound disappointment. Mother runs an e-commerce site. It's quite popular, you know. Didn't you know, Dad? I'm helping her with the photography for the site. David handles the accounting. Yes, I've been running an e-commerce site for quite some time, a job I could do while staying at home. It's been quite successful, and recently, inspired by our pet, Coco, I started selling pet products. Thanks to the help of our 2 sons, the business is doing even better now. John looked at me in disbelief when he learned about my earnings. Hearing our conversation, Maria raised her voice. John, you're on my side, right? You're living with me, aren't you? If you're earning so much, you should pay off the remaining mortgage. John joined in, agreeing with Maria. What an outrageous father, expecting his son to pay off the mortgage. John, staying remarkably calm, looked straight at Maria and said, Maria, you got me a job that would keep me away for long periods. What were you doing during the 2 weeks I was gone? Did you take good care of my mother's house, doing chores and preparing meals? You didn't, right? And besides that. John then laid out several photos on the table. They showed Maria walking closely with an unknown man in a busy downtown area. Some photos even clearly captured them entering a hotel. What is this? This is a fake. Are you trying to frame me with these? Maria grabbed the photos from the table and started tearing them apart. Sorry, but those are negatives. They can't be faked. James is a professional photographer. He has a passion for his craft and, instead of using digital cameras, he prefers film cameras in his daily work. I just happened to see her downtown and thought I was mistaken. But then I saw her again on a different day. I was worried about my brother. So I just snapped the photos. James explained, as Maria glared at him. Without changing his expression, David, in a detached voice, told Maria. Maria, let's end this. We're getting a divorce. At David's words, Maria screamed. What? David, you don't get to order me around. I'm so over a sneaky man like you. Since you're the one asking for a divorce, you'll have to pay me alimony. Maria, though beautiful and well-styled, sadly lacks in personality and intellect. She probably wouldn't understand even if we told her that she, being at fault, should be the one to pay alimony. It's a waste of time to try to make her understand, so we'll let the lawyer explain it in detail. More importantly, there are other things we need to question Maria about. By the way, Maria, it's a bit late to ask, but you aren't really pregnant, are you? Maria's face, which was red with anger, suddenly contorted. Maria, it's been 5 months since you came here, but your body shape hasn't changed at all. And even if you drink and smoke moderately, doing it every night is a bit much, don't you think? Maria's face became increasingly rigid. And then, with a completely stiff expression, she retorted. What are you talking about? A little lie like that is nothing to get upset about. You should be thanking me for giving you the joy of possibly having a grandchild. I'm actually glad I didn't have David's child. I almost raised my hand to her at that point. Her lack of consideration for others' feelings was infuriating. Looking at David, he seemed calmer than expected, perhaps having suspected the lie. You said you were hospitalized and took money from my mother for that, right? That could be considered fraud. James added, to which Maria responded. I really was hospitalized. It wasn't for pregnancy, but another illness. No one believed Maria's words. It was already confirmed on her social media that she went on a trip to Hawaii during the period she claimed to be hospitalized. Her suntan skin was probably due to that trip. She must have thought I, an older lady, wouldn't be on social media. Her carelessness was almost laughable. While we were confronting Maria, John was sipping tea, acting as if he had nothing to do with it. It was about time to make him face the consequences. So? What are you going to do? Are you going to stay in this house? Then John, as if he had a brilliant idea, said to me. I can't pay $2,700 a month. If you guys are unreliable, why not sell the house? It's worth millions. It's in my name, so it's my money, right? Then I'll find a new house with that money. How about that for a great idea? His shallow thinking almost made me respect him. I explained to John in a way he could understand. John, there are still 6 years left on the mortgage, roughly $200,000. Let's say the house is worth $300,000. If we sell it, we'll only get $100,000. Understand? And we'll split that $100,000 in the property division. You might get $50,000. But I'll be claiming alimony from you for your infidelity and other matters. So, in the end, you won't have much left. Think about that. John wore an expression that made it hard to tell if he understood what I was saying. He probably didn't know where to begin asking questions. Huh? Wait, what do you mean by property division? Indeed, it's a term that would pique one's interest. I answered simply. Yes, because we are getting a divorce. For a moment, John's face contorted. I thought it would be hard for him to bring up the next part, so I decided to explain. John, you promised to introduce your friends to Maria's model friends, right? It's popular among young people these days, isn't it? Going to dinner with older men and getting an allowance? You and Maria had a win-win relationship. Did you know that mixers with older men and models were happening in this living room almost every night? At my words, both John and Maria turned pale. They clearly knew what I was talking about. Maria, ever resilient, still retorted. Don't talk nonsense. There's no proof of that. I presented the evidence as Maria wished. It was a video from the living room recorded on my cell phone. It showed John and his older friends, along with young women who appeared to be models, having a loud party in this living room. Drinking and socializing. Before Maria could accuse me of illegal recording, I clarified. This is footage from the pet camera in the living room, meant for our pet, Coco. I usually turn it off when I leave the house. Someone must have turned it on while drunk. I was surprised when this footage was sent to me unexpectedly. Originally, the camera was to monitor Coco, but it inadvertently provided evidence. Hey, Dad. By the way, I also caught you on camera going to a hotel with young girls downtown, so there's no escaping that. I wish I didn't have to take such photos of my own father. With all the evidence presented, John and Maria were finally at a loss for words. Both of them sank deep into the sofa, staring off into the distance. The spacious living room, meant for family gatherings, now felt more like a funeral parlor. What must this house, built 30 years ago with so many dreams, think of this broken family now? I wish I could ask it. In the silence, I heard the creak of the house settling. I knew John couldn't pay the mortgage. Perhaps I wanted to see what decision he would make under these circumstances. John suggested selling the house. His love for this house was only that deep. Maybe he lost interest in the house and the family when he stopped contributing financially. I wonder if I should have divorced him sooner. It's too late to know now. There's a scratch on this wall. I'll fix it later. After I paid off the remaining mortgage in full and transferred the house to my name, it became my house, no longer John's. I couldn't bring myself to sell the house I had put so much love into. John wanted to sell it until the end, to keep some money for himself, but I firmly rejected that idea. He should learn to be frugal after spending lavishly for so long. The savings we had as joint property seemingly vanished on his youthful adventures. Hence, I'm demanding alimony without mercy. I heard through the grapevine that he's now living in a small apartment. The house has been slightly remodeled, and now serves as both my office and home. David and James are living here with me, helping with my business. They're more than just helpers now, they're indispensable staff. Mom, can you check this? David, utilizing his existing qualifications, is in charge of accounting. The divorce with Maria was finalized through a lawyer, and it seems her parents paid the alimony in full. Apparently, they will be asking Maria to repay them. She kept spouting nonsense to David till the end, but he ignored it all. There's a possibility that lying about the pregnancy could constitute a crime since I gave her money based on that lie. However, since Maria's parents repaid the money I had given her, I chose not to file a lawsuit. Kind David deeply regretted not being able to give me a grandchild. David, James, let's take a break. As the weather was nice, we sat on the garden lawn to rest. We used to sunbathe in the yard when the boys were little. I'm happiest right now. At my spontaneous words, both of my sons smiled together. We planted a small sapling in the house's garden. It signifies a new beginning and wishes for future happiness. Coco, our pet, took an interest in the sapling, running and tumbling around it. I wonder what I will be like when this sapling grows large. What about my sons, and how will Coco be? After a moment of contemplation, I stopped thinking about it. Because I feel happier now. From the balcony window, my sons waved at me. Coco looked at their faces and let out a cute sound. What a beautiful day today. I am happy now. For a moment, I was at a loss. It wasn't until my husband, who stood there defiantly, threw a vase and it shattered that I finally grasped the situation. I was soaked with the water from the vase, thanks to my husband. Make sure you clean up the room before I come back. Yes, I'll make sure it's clean. It was my fault for dozing off. After giving me a thorough scolding, my husband left for his business trip with a look of satisfaction. He must have thought he could say anything to me, knowing I had nowhere else to turn. His behavior became more and more domineering. He had no idea that soon, he would have no home to return to. My name is Jessica Parker, and I'm 36 years old. I married my husband, Michael, 5 years ago. You could say ours was an office romance. Since we started at the company at the same time, we freely vented about work and supported each other, which led to us dating. From there, things naturally progressed to marriage. I didn't quit my job after getting married. Thankfully, my boss, Karen, even said, feel free to take maternity or parental leave, so we planned with that in mind. However, we struggled to conceive. Could it be that you are infertile? What? It's not necessarily just my problem, is it? No, usually these matters are mostly on the woman's side. That was a point of contention between us. But after years of fertility treatments, I finally became pregnant. Michael was not enthusiastic about the treatments, so I used my savings from before our marriage to pay for them. It almost emptied my savings, but I was truly happy to be pregnant. Then came another shock. What? Twins. I was blessed with twins. The thought of raising twins I hadn't yet met was intimidating, but Michael was ecstatic. Twins are definitely adorable. Wow, I can't wait. This is going to be amazing. Haha. His laid-back attitude irritated me at times, but I was also pleased, thinking he was trying to cheer me up in his own way. Despite some difficulties during the pregnancy, both babies were born healthy. We had a boy and a girl. We named them Alex and Emily. Raising twins was indeed a monumental task. Since my recovery after childbirth was slow, both our mothers came to help, but when they had to leave after a month, I broke down crying from the stress. I can't manage both of them on my own. Please don't go. I was emotionally fragile, but it was a sincere plea. But our mothers had their own lives. It was a lot to even have them stay for a month. I'll do my best too. Let's raise them together. After being persuaded by Michael, I somehow managed to calm down. Hearing, Jessica, you're not alone, as he patted my head brought me some comfort. But I soon faced the reality. Michael was all talk. Raising them together was just a fantasy. He wouldn't lift a finger unless prompted. The idea of anticipating needs and acting proactively seemed beyond him. Sometimes, even when I asked for help, he would refuse. Change Alex's diaper. I'm breastfeeding Emily right now. All right. Oh no. Impossible, he's done poo. Jessica, you handle it. My husband flatly refused to change diapers if it was a poo. But, I'm breastfeeding right now. Just change it after you're done. Modern diapers are so good, they can wait that long. The smell is making me sick. I feel like throwing up. I need a break. What? Hey. Michael. This was how it went. To Michael, parenting was something he did when he felt like it, and only what he felt like doing. In the end, it was always up to me to act. When the twins turned 1, I decided to go back to work. Perhaps because we lived in a less populated area, thankfully, both kids got spots in daycare. Returning to work after a long time, everyone, including my colleagues, was kind. Despite being back at work, I felt like a newcomer all over again. Many people sympathized, saying, it must be hard balancing work and childcare. But honestly, life was easier after the kids started daycare. I could eat lunch without worrying about the twins and even chat with colleagues. Single-handedly taking care of the kids was harder for me. However, there were troubling times too. It was when the kids fell ill. I had to leave early or take sudden days off, apologizing to everyone around me each time. Of course, I asked Michael for help, but he acted as if it was none of his concern. I was working while you were off. It's hard, you know. He was making excuses that didn't make any sense. When I looked upset, he'd say, if you're going to make that face, you shouldn't have gone back to work. I was told so. Then, about 3 months after I returned to work, in the presence of my mother-in-law, Michael said to me, "Kids should be taken care of by their mothers at home until at least they're 3. Putting them in daycare so young is why they get sick so easily. Don't you feel bad for causing trouble at work?" What is he talking about? I do feel bad about work. Unlike you, who can freely work overtime, I'm struggling, yet I'm working my hardest. Don't act like you know everything. I wanted to shout that, but I held back because my mother-in-law was there. The mother-in-law who was present seemed somewhat uncomfortable, but she appeared to mostly agree with Michael. Maybe it's better if you don't overwork yourself. If you're in trouble, just let us know. We can help financially, right? Faced with that, I couldn't say I wanted to keep working. So, I resigned and went back to the life of single-handedly taking care of the kids. But something was different from before. It was our income. Unlike during my previous maternity leave, now that I had quit, my income was 0. Michael's income was not substantial. Naturally, our family's financial situation became tighter. "Hey, about this month's payments, it's tough because of the car tax." What? So what? Despite knowing the situation, Michael responded with an irritable tone. Still, I tentatively said to him, "Could we maybe ask your parents for a little help?" My mother-in-law had said, "You can always rely on us." So, I thought maybe he could ask them. But he clearly didn't like the idea. Huh? What do you mean? Are you planning to mooch off my family? It's not mooching. I was thinking we could pay them back once I start working again. No way, that's not happening. We are not borrowing any money. Figure it out. Managing the household budget is your job. That's how he always ended the conversation. Even after that, I tried to negotiate with him whenever he seemed to be in a good mood, but it was futile. Even if he said to figure it out, my savings from before we were married were gone because I had used them for infertility treatments. My family was a single-parent household and didn't have money to lend. After much thought, I decided to sell my car. By selling it, I was able to get some money, albeit a small amount. When I told Michael, he seemed somewhat pleased. I always thought it was unnecessary. You're always at home anyway, you don't need a car. It's better this way. In this area, where bus services are sparse, a car was essential. From now on, any outings with the twins would have to be on foot. What about shopping? Tears welled up, but I managed to hold them back. By this time, I had started to consider divorce. Michael continued to only participate in childcare when he felt like it. He did love the children. But still, only when he felt like it. Such incidents accumulated, and I could no longer see a future with him. I wanted to discuss the possibility of divorce with my mother first. But I couldn't, due to a certain reason. It was my grandmother's care. She had fallen ill a while back and required constant care. So, my mother moved in with her and was taking care of her while also working. I couldn't bring up my divorce issues and add stress to my mother. I couldn't say it, thinking that. Moreover, with my grandmother there, I couldn't go back to my family home even if I divorced. No job, no savings, no home to return to. With this situation, I couldn't bring myself to go through with the divorce. Knowing I had nowhere to flee, Michael's behavior grew increasingly arrogant. He would complain about the lack of dishes at dinner or click his tongue if the room was messy. He turned into an absolute tyrant. Unable to stand up to him, I just tried not to upset him. Before I knew it, the children were 2 years old. They were adorable, but with their growing self-awareness, they were not easy to handle. And there were 2 of them. Today, as soon as I took my eyes off them, the carpet was mercilessly covered in countless lines drawn with a permanent marker. Ah. Messed up again. Eh? Where did you get the permanent marker from? It was supposed to be in the drawer. Ah. Michael again. I scolded the children for now. 2 crying children. But it was before nap time, and they were probably sleepy too. No sooner had they cried than they fell asleep. While waiting for the right moment to put down the children I was holding under each arm, I sighed. I have to sort this out before Michael comes home. I'm sleepy. The night waking has started again recently. First, I need to go upstairs. That's when my consciousness faded. Hey. What are you doing? Eh? Ah. When I woke up next, I was soaking wet. For a moment, I didn't understand what had happened. Standing in front of me was Michael, looking furious as if he were a wrathful deity. While I'm out there breaking my back working, you're here napping. Must be nice. With that, Michael carelessly threw something near me. There was a clinking sound. That's when my mind finally cleared. It was a vase that had broken. I had fallen asleep without realizing it, and Michael had thrown the water from the vase on me. Not only was I shocked by the water, but I was also terrified that he had thrown the vase. It could have hit me if things had gone slightly differently. Or maybe he didn't care if it did hit me. But what about Alex and Emily? I quickly looked around and heard the children's laughter and the sound of a TV cartoon coming from a gap in the sliding door to the next room. Thank goodness. Hey. Are you even listening? Yes. I answered, looking down. Man, I'm so jealous. I'm exhausted and you're just sleeping peacefully. It must be nice to be a housewife and have it so easy. There's no point in arguing with him when he's like this. I just said, I'm sorry, without looking up. Seriously. And? You've got everything ready for my business trip starting tomorrow, right? Yes. I handed him the bag packed with underwear, shirts, and other overnight essentials. He glanced inside and nodded. Great, just what I needed before a trip, this kind of hassle. Ah, so irritating. I'm sorry. Looking up through the strands, I saw him smiling with satisfaction. Make sure you clean up the room before I get back. Yes, I'll make sure it's tidy. Oh. You said it, right? Make it spotlessly clean. Remember, you have nowhere else to go. Just do as I say. When I nodded, he seemed utterly pleased with himself. He left the house humming a tune. After hearing the door close and his car drive away, I opened the sliding door to the next room. Alex. Emily. There were the twins, playing and laughing, and my mother, trying her best to cover their ears, tears streaming down her face. Seeing me, my mother gently let go of the children and hugged me tightly. Mom. Jessica. You've done so well. You've been so strong. As she said this, she hugged me even tighter. In fact, a few hours before Michael returned, my mother had been at our house since that morning. She had contacted me in the morning. Grandma has been moved to a facility, she said. They had been looking for a place for a while, and they finally found one. That means I can come and help you, she had told me, going out of her way to let me know. At her thoughtfulness, I couldn't help but cry over the phone. My mother came to visit because she was worried. I can't believe Michael would do such terrible things. I had told her some things beforehand, but she probably didn't expect it to be this bad. I certainly didn't expect to have water thrown on me. Anger was evident in my mother's voice. Before I fell asleep, my mother had been upstairs hanging laundry. And when she came down, we were still sleeping, she said. The children woke up first, so she played with them in the next room to not wake me up. She wanted to intervene right away, but fearing for the children, she instead turned up the TV volume and covered their ears as a small measure of protection. My mother must have been scared too. Thank you, Mom. My mother nodded. First, take a bath and relax. Then we can talk, she said, patting my shoulder. After the bath, I found my mother on the phone. Thank you very much, she said cheerfully as she ended the call. Mom? Who were you talking to? She smiled and shared the details with me. She even explained her plans for the future. After hearing everything, I thought it sounded exciting. But I wonder if it will really work out. Don't worry. I'm here with you. Let's do our best together, she said and hugged me tightly again. At that moment, I couldn't have imagined how far my mother was willing to go. The next day, I was at my former workplace seeking advice. Having my mother on my side was reassuring, but money was my biggest concern regarding the divorce. I was likely to get custody, but I doubted Michael would willingly pay child support. I don't have any special qualifications. Returning to my old job would be ideal. I didn't want to work at the same place as Michael, but if we were in different departments, I could avoid seeing him. Even if I couldn't return, getting any information about opportunities in the same industry would be helpful. I thought it was worth a shot to ask. That's what I had in mind. Karen, my former boss, greeted me with a smile, saying, "Long time no see." Karen was a woman I admired. I had even confided in her when I had problems with Michael. It's been a while. I'm sorry for the sudden visit. That's fine. What do you want to talk about? I hesitated about how much to share since Michael would continue working there. It probably wasn't a good idea to mention that he had thrown a vase of water at me. I didn't want to make things awkward for Karen. I simply told her that I was considering a divorce and looking for work to support myself. I'd be happy to return here, but if not, do you know of any good opportunities? I knew it was a lot to ask, but I was desperate. Karen must have been surprised. However, her response was unexpected. I thought so. Sorry? What do you mean? Jessica, I hate to bring up unpleasant topics, but can you stay calm and listen? Karen began to speak seriously. Her story was shocking but somehow made sense. Is that so? I'm sorry you had to hear this. No, thank you. This information might work to my advantage. Thank you so much. I was glad I had consulted with Karen. While it might seem odd to be happy about such news, it was an unexpected benefit. And there was more. Karen spoke to the higher-ups about my return. And thanks to a need for more staff, my reemployment was quickly decided. I'm on your side, Jessica. Do your best. But don't overdo it. We'll be waiting, she said. Thank you so much. Well, it's not just me. I think everyone is on your side, Jessica. Karen laughed. One less worry for me. Now, all that's left is to settle things with Michael. A few days later, I received a call from Michael while I was at my parents' house with the kids. Hey. What's this all about? He was yelling as usual, but there was a hint of panic in his voice this time. What do you mean? I heard you're planning to return to work. I got the info. It must have been Karen's doing. She said she would spread the word to make it easier for me to return. But I didn't expect the news to reach Michael on his business trip. How did you know? Who told you? It was a simple question. But for some reason, he hesitated to answer. Even when I pressed him, he dodged the question. Anyway. There's also a rumor that we're getting a divorce. We need to squash that rumor right away, so I'm heading to the company now. There's no way I'm letting you return. Right now? What about your business trip? I'm on my way back. Let's meet at the office. Handle the kids somehow. Don't bring them along. He sounded desperate. He might act big at home, but his image at the company seems important to him. Of course, I knew there were other reasons too. I messaged Karen, I'll be stopping by, and headed to the office. Michael had already arrived. He glared at me for a moment when he saw me, but quickly switched to a smile. Such a facade. Where are our kids? Mom's looking after them at home. I see. We entered the building where our workplace was located. As soon as we reached the floor of my old department and entered the room. Welcome back. Everyone exclaimed in unison. Looking around, I saw my former colleagues, superiors, and juniors approaching with smiles and clapping their hands. Michael and I were quickly surrounded. Karen was among the crowd. She took my hand and said again, "Welcome back." Michael, standing next to me, had a forced smile, clearly flustered. "Eh? Why is everyone gathered here?" he asked with a forced laugh. Karen responded. "We saw Jessica and just had to come. You know, she's returning next month? We're all looking forward to it." Eh? Next month? That's soon. Ignoring Michael, who looked utterly confused, I talked with my other colleagues and Karen. By the way, where are your kids today? My mom's watching them. Right, they're not in daycare yet. Seizing what he thought was an opportunity, Michael's eyes lit up. That's right. Even though I've been offered to return, we haven't secured a daycare spot yet. There's no one to look after our kids. I was actually planning to decline the return offer today. Eh? What are you talking about, Michael? Karen looked at Michael with a puzzled expression. He was taken aback. What do you mean what? I'm just stating the facts. Michael, you seem to be quite out of the loop. Didn't you know? A daycare center has been established within the company. To bewildered Michael, Karen explained simply. The daycare center is a child care facility located within the company. It's a place where employees' children are taken care of, and currently, there is enough capacity to accommodate all children of employees who wish to use it. So, no problem there. Karen explained with a smile, and Michael, with a strained smile on his face, said, I see. But the daycare only takes children up to age 3, so after that, you'll need to find another solution, she added. At this, his eyes lit up again. Well, that's tough luck, then. Our kids are almost 3, right? Right, Jessica? He looked to me for agreement, so I tilted my head in confusion. What? Why would that be a problem? It should be fine. But, you know, I've heard so many stories about daycare rejections. And with twins, it must be even harder. He mumbled, so I couldn't help but say. It'll be fine. Single parents usually get some priority, after all. What? Single parent? Seizing the moment, I pulled out pieces of paper I had been waiting to use. With everyone watching, I handed them to Michael. What are these? They are divorce papers. Michael, please divorce me. Holding the divorce papers, he trembled. Why? You should know why. What you've done to me, and what you haven't done for me, I'll never forget. He flinched for a moment, then shook his head in denial. That's just a minor misunderstanding. You can't divorce over something like that. Oh, should I mention a more significant reason for divorce, then? Like your affair, perhaps? He visibly flinched. His complexion turned pale. What? No, she's just. Playing dumb won't help. Everyone knows. The client's daughter, right? Weren't you accompanied by her on your business trip? I heard someone saw you, I confronted him. He tried to deny it with, no, that's not it, but his eyes were darting around, betraying his nervousness. This was the crucial piece of information Karen had shared with me. How dare you act all high and mighty? What about, housewives have it easy, huh? You're the one taking it easy by dumping childcare on me and having affairs. I retorted. He stammered, but that's. I was depressed working in the same place as you, but thankfully, it looks like I won't have to anymore. Despite being married, he had made advances towards a client's daughter. He was bound to face appropriate consequences for his actions. He was lost for words, but I'll be leaving first. You get a good scolding, I declared and turned to leave. Wait. Jessica. Wait. He tried to stop me, but everyone around us held him back. Later, he would face a thorough reprimand, but the drama didn't end there. As I was about to take a bath that evening, my phone rang. It was Michael. Hello? Hey. Jessica, what's this about? He sounded on the verge of tears. Perhaps already crying. What's wrong? When I got home, the house was gone. Completely empty. What's going on? Where are you? Where are Alex and Emily? He panicked. I simply replied, and explained. After he left for his business trip, the person my mother had been talking to on the phone was a real estate agent. We had decided to sell the house, as we had been considering for some time. You sold our house without my permission, he exclaimed. The house was in my name. I was the one who paid for it. You didn't contribute a penny because it was old and secondhand, I reminded him. The real estate agent, happy with the arrangement, quickly proceeded with the sale. We were introduced to a new property through the agent and moved out hastily. Furthermore, the agent was more interested in the land, so it was swiftly cleared. Michael must have been shocked to return to nothing. I was hoping we could talk when I got back, he said, his voice breaking. I have nothing to discuss with you. Think about how you've exploited and treated me all this time, I coldly stated. He whimpered, but I felt no sympathy. I cleaned up the place just as you wanted. Spotlessly clean, indeed. I said sarcastically and hung up. After saying that, I immediately hung up the phone. It seemed like there were several more calls afterward, but I didn't bother to check. Without any concern, I went to take a bath with my twins. Michael was adamant, "I don't want a divorce." But with the persuasion of his parents, the divorce was finally finalized just the other day. Of course, there was alimony and child support involved. Michael became infamous as the married man who hit on his work colleagues and eventually had to quit his job. Now, he's working at a factory, thanks to his parents' connections. Given his high pride, I imagine it's tough for him every day. As for me, I'm living a peaceful life with my mother and kids. I'm constantly amazed by the difference between my ex-husband and my mother and can't help but feel grateful every day. This experience has reinforced my belief that parenting isn't something to be done alone. Karen also visits occasionally to play with my kids. My kids are still a handful, but with the current situation, I'm confident we'll be okay. It looks like there's a bright future ahead.